Hi guys, this is my second video. In the first video I put on the uniform to give a voice to those cops who couldn't come out and say what they wanted to say, especially in their uniform, because the job won't allow them to. So I put the uniform on to say things that I felt needed to be said on their behalf. One of the things I did that I shouldn't have was I wore the wrong collar brass. All right, as it was pointed out to me, I had the collar brass that usually goes on the jacket, which is bigger than the insignia that goes on the shirt. Of course, cops, as usual, broke my balls because that's what we do. So I just wanted to apologize for that, and I hope I didn't embarrass anyone. But being retired, that's all I had. So sorry about that. The second thing is, in that video, I called out another cop by name. And for me, that felt very uncomfortable for me. And I thought about it, and I thought about taking the video down. I had other cops on the video, and I mentioned about the other cops kneeling and stuff. And you saw them on the video, but you really didn't see their faces, and you certainly couldn't make out their name tags or see who they were. But I did mention one cop by name, and it did bother me. And then my wife, who's much smarter than I am, pointed out that the whole purpose of the video was to call out those who are afraid to say what needs to be said and afraid to do what needs to be done. So after thinking about it for a while, I realized she's right, as usual, and I'm not going to take the video down, and I'm not going to apologize to that chief. In fact, if anyone needs an apology, he needs to apologize because of the way he behaved at that protest. So video staying up, and I'm not apologizing to that guy. All right, so the main purpose of that video was to talk about poor leadership and how it affects mainly police. And I cannot think of a better example of poor leadership than Mayor de Blasio. He was handed a beautiful city with almost no crime, and through his incompetence and stupidity, he's actually run it into the ground. New York used to be the biggest, the safest big city in the world, and now it's garbage. People are leaving by the thousands. I mean, look at what incompetence has done. So I'm going to talk a little bit about him, so bear with me. Being a far-left politician, most of them do run their cities into the ground, but he's also extremely hypocritical, just like most on the left. For example, let's take the COVID checkpoints. I don't know if you know about this. Have you heard about the COVID checkpoints in New York City?
So starting today, we're going to do something new in New York City. We will have checkpoints at key entry points to the city. Travelers coming in from those states will be given information about the quarantine. They will be reminded that it is required, not optional.
And how will Mayor de Blasio, I call him the anti-cop, by the way, which I think is a great name. He absolutely despises cops and loves criminals, so I call him the anti-cop. How will the anti-cop enforce this policy of vehicle checkpoints? He's going to use the sheriff.
The sheriff's office, in coordination with other law enforcement agencies, will undertake quarantine checkpoints at major bridge and tunnel crossings into New York City.
So just think about it. The anti-cop is having the sheriff forcibly pull people over, forcing them to fill out paperwork, and force them to check in like they're on parole. All right? And after you do that and you fill out that form, by the way, if you don't fill out that form, it's a $2,000 fine. But let's say you fill out the form. Let's see what happens next.
We've made more than 86,000 phone calls to travelers coming into New York City from the designated high-risk states, and we've sent more than 20,000 text messages to date. And if we can't get through to you on the phone, we've deployed teams that are now knocking on your door to check in with you and to make sure that you're safe.
All right, so they're going to text you, they're going to call you, and if you don't answer, they're going to come to your house. And they're not coming to your house to make sure that you're safe. They're coming to your house to make sure that you obey, that you don't break quarantine. And if you do, how much do you think that fine is?
Failure to quarantine is a violation of state law, and it comes with serious penalties. In fact, under certain circumstances, the fines can be as high as $10,000.
So let's put this $10,000 in context, okay? Do you remember back in July on the Brooklyn Bridge, we had that animal who attacked cops with a cane? Do you remember that? Here she is, watch. Boom, over the head, twice. And the only reason why she stops, watch, this cop takes out a taser And look, she runs away. Here she is hopping a fence, and like all cowards do, they hit you and they run. There she goes, running down the block. She attacked Lieutenant Michael Butler. Here's a picture of the lieutenant. She opened them up pretty badly. And Sergeant Richard Adamayak, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name. I don't have a picture of the sergeant, but according to the chief, he was opened up pretty badly too.
This was a violent incident. My sergeant who works with me hit in the head with the cane. He got 8 staples put in his head.
So we get her, right? The NYPD always does. Antonio Torres, police officer Antonio Torres, finds her in a car getting high. He goes to lock her up. She fights him. He has to call an 85. And during that scuffle, she bites another cop on the head.
A 24-year-old woman is under arrest accused of using a cane to attack officers during that incident. There are reports that she hit a police sergeant and tried to bite another while being taken into custody.
Here she is, and even though she's in handcuffs, she still manages to turn her hands around to give us all the finger. Her attorney, Michael Horn, describes her in court as, quote, a kind and generous young lady and a Black Lives Matter activist, figures, who's enrolled full-time at Queens College. All right, so the ADA asked the judge, whose name was John Howard Algarin, or Algarin, I don't know how to pronounce it. The ADA asked Judge Howard Algarin to set bail at $75,000 for this animal. And what does the judge do? He sets bail at 1/10 of that. Not $75,000, $7,500. Does that put that $10,000 fine in context a little bit? You attack 2 cops with a cane, split both of their heads open, and then you bite another cop on his scalp. $7,500. You break quarantine, de Blasio fines you $10,000. So, I mean, you know that's disgusting, right? $7,500 for what she did to those 3 cops, and you don't answer your door and it's 10 grand, right? So I tried to look up a little bit, as much as I could, about this Judge Howard Algarin, and I found out he used to be an attorney for Con Edison. He's a Democrat, of course, and he was elected to the court on January 1st of this year. So we have him for another 10 years. Isn't that great? But what I found odd was he saw another defendant in his courtroom a month earlier. This guy, Frank Pagan. Here's this picture. Pagan stole a motorcycle, and the idiot was dumb enough to try to bring the stolen motorcycle onto the subway, right, onto a train. Now, Judge Howard Algarin wasn't allowed to set bail for stealing that motorcycle, but he kind of finds, by the way, thank you de Blasio and Cuomo for those laws, but he finds a loophole and realizes that this guy, Pagan, stole a Maserati about a month prior, right? So the judge can't hold him for stealing the motorcycle, but he does hold him for stealing the vehicle, which was still pending and open, right? And what do you think Judge Howard Algarin set bail at for stealing that car? $25,000. Does that seem a little weird? You open up 3 cops, $7,500. You steal a car, $25,000. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem right. So remember, this is a big riot on the Brooklyn Bridge, right? In addition to the cane animal, you had someone else arrested named Bank Shaborn, who also appeared in Judge Howard Algarin's courtroom. And what Bank Shaborn did was he used brass knuckles to open up another cop, punching Lieutenant Richard Mack in the face, breaking both of his cheekbones, and giving him 12 staples in his head.
You were in the hospital a couple of days. Tell us about your injuries.
Yeah, I suffered a fractured orbital lobe, and I needed emergency surgery.
I'm sorry about that. What about the people who allegedly did this? The person who allegedly assaulted you. Where are they now?
Well, numerous police officers were assaulted on that bridge that day. I was never hit with the stick. I was assaulted by someone else that had like brass knuckle type jewelry, from what I was informed with.
Yeah.
I was temporarily blinded during this, so I couldn't really tell, and I was assaulted by several individuals on that bridge.
And are any of them in jail right now, Lieutenant?
As far as I know, I think they're almost all out.
They were all released?
They were either released or bail was posted.
And what do you think Judge Howard Algarin set bail for opening up that lieutenant? $10,000. So $7,500 for opening up cops with a cane, $10,000 for breaking the cop's cheekbones and giving him 12 staples in his head using brass knuckles, $25,000 for a car. I know you know this is crazy, right? But it's true. It's true. And what makes this worse is during that peaceful protest on the bridge, there was another arrest. Karan Campbell was arrested for assaulting 3 cops in uniform. One of them actually lost consciousness. And Karan Campbell was seen by a different judge, not Howard Algarin, but someone named Robert Rosenthal, who's also a Democrat, who was appointed by Bill de Blasio. And how much bail do you think Robert Rosenthal set for Karan Campbell? How much? What do you think?
One of the 2 men arrested for attacking an NYPD lieutenant and NYPD chief, Terrence Monahan, has been released without bail. Police identified him as Karan Campbell. The second suspect, Banks Shaborn, is being held on $10,000 bail. The attack happened on Wednesday during what was supposed to be a peaceful protest on the Brooklyn Bridge. 8 officers were injured during that protest.
All right, so how does all this tie back to Mayor de Blasio? I mean, he wasn't the one that set bail, right? Even though he appointed one of the judges that did. When asked about the Brooklyn Bridge assault, he said he was upset, but a bigger problem was the police unions.
De Blasio condemned the attack and went on to say a bigger threat to community healing is the NYPD union, the Sergeants Benevolent Association, which has repeatedly criticized his handling of the protests.
And they have been fighting with our police leadership for years. They attacked Jimmy O'Neill viciously. They've attacked Dermot Shea. They don't try to create anything good. They only try and tear down, which is why I have no respect for the leadership of the SBA.
And the SBA responded to the mayor's comments saying, quote, the city knows he hates cops and accountability. Thank him for finally being honest. This is the first time since he took office that he has told the truth.
Hey, Sergeant Mullins, I could not agree with you more. Keep up the good work. Now let's get back to the checkpoint.
New York City now tightens the reins on travelers with stricter tracing and the threat of 5-figure fines. Thanks for joining us at 11. I'm Stephen Holt.
And I'm Natalie Pasquarello. The Tri-States Travel Advisory has been in effect for exactly 6 weeks now. And today, New York City took new action across the 5 boroughs to enforce this.
We're talking about checkpoints that are now set up at key entry points of the city, like the Lincoln and Holland tunnels and the Goethals, Outer Bridge Crossing, and Bayonne bridges. Teams there will be looking for travelers arriving from these COVID hotspots. Anyone caught breaking quarantine faces $10,000 fines. The Sheriff's Department now setting up the first of those checkpoints tonight.
On the Goethals Bridge, the sheriff's deputies lined up. This is the first COVID checkpoint in New York City. Those traveling from hotspots will be asked to quarantine when arriving to New York. If they don't comply, they could face heavy fines of up to $10,000. Last month, New York airports started requiring travelers to fill out a form to help with contact tracing. Now, in these new checkpoints, enforcement agents will do the same at bridges, tunnels, even Port Authority bus terminal and Penn Station. Drivers heading through New York tonight leaving this idea and these checkpoints in the rearview mirror.
So forcibly stopping people and requiring them to provide documentation in the name of COVID is very different than what de Blasio said when it came to DACA.
We have your back in New York City. We will protect you. We will not ask your documentation status. Our police never ask your documentation status. They work with all people, all immigrants.
How is it that this anti-cop uses law enforcement to establish a perimeter around his city, but he's for open borders. According to de Blasio, you should be able to come freely into our nation, just not into his city. We can't vet those coming into our country, but we need to know everything there is about you if you come into New York City, including your body temperature. And isn't it ironic that de Blasio disbands Stop and Frisk, where bad guys who were suspected of carrying guns were stopped on the street, but forcing people to pull over and stopping them who have admittedly committed no crime in the name of COVID, that's okay. Doesn't de Blasio realize that people don't want to be treated like suspects, especially when they haven't done anything? That it's a tremendous invasion of privacy, especially those who are innocent. In fact, I remember him saying something similar to that.
It was an unconstitutional use of a tactic. It was not stopping someone because there was a specific reason or cause. All communities want safety, want a working relationship between police and community, but what no one wants is to have their privacy invaded for no reason. No one wants to be degraded or treated like a suspect when they haven't done anything.
Oh, that was Stop and Frisk. That was an invasion of privacy. Stopping people in the name of COVID, that's okay. And you didn't just get rid of Stop and Frisk, you disbanded anti-crime. How can you claim to care about minority lives when you dissolve the most important unit keeping them safe? They're not taking guns off the street in Soho or in Tribeca. They're taking guns off the street in the ghetto and in the projects. And whose lives are impacted by this more than any others? Black lives. And you claim to care about them? And another thing, what did George Floyd and Minneapolis have to do with cops in plain clothes? Those cops are in uniform. You gave this up without a single protester even asking for this. And BLM praised this. They were ecstatic. Why? Because the truth is, some Black Lives Matter. You get killed in the projects, they don't care. You won't even see it on the news, unless it's by a cop. If a cop shoots you, it'll be all over the news. But you get killed in the projects, nobody cares. You get killed holding your daughter's hand while you take her to school, shot down in the middle of the crosswalk. Did you see that little girl run away in panic? What about DeVell Gardner Jr.? Does that name ring a bell, Mr. Mayor?
Family, friends, and the community came out Monday morning to say goodbye to one-year-old DeVell Samuel Gardner Jr., a tiny tot whose senseless death has had a huge impact on the city. DeVell was with his family at a barbecue on July 12th when gunfire erupted nearby. A stray bullet meant for someone else hit the baby while he was sitting in his stroller near a playground in Brooklyn's Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood. The shooting that took DeVell's life happened as the NYPD reports a 276% increase in shootings citywide as compared to this time last year. As the Gardner family now searches for strength to move forward, sadly, their innocent son's death has become part of a heartbreaking statistic here in the city. Police say of 50 shootings this month, 10 were minors.
Everybody talk about Black Lives Matter. What about baby lives?
And of course, the NYPD gets them. Our detectives do an amazing job behind the scenes. People have no clue of the amount of work that goes in to catch these guys. But they did it again.
We want to get to some new information tonight in that shooting death of a one-year-old boy in Brooklyn. We now know a person of interest has been arrested. DeVell Gardner Jr. was murdered over the weekend while sitting in his stroller at a family barbecue. Surveillance video shows the gunman firing wildly down the street into that gathering. This was along Madison Street in Bed-Stuy. Tonight, we're hearing from the toddler's father and grandmother. She brought up the Black Lives Matter movement, questioning how effective this is.
He will never see his son again. And they talk about Black Lives Matter. How is mattering? I don't see the point. Like, shooting is still going on. People are still, doing crazy things out here.
Sources tell us the suspect was taken into custody in Brooklyn by the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force and the NYPD. In the Bronx, these 3 men are now charged in a drive-by shooting death of a father who was killed while crossing the street with his 6-year-old daughter. Their names are Devon Delks, Laquan Hayward, and Devin Vines. Surveillance video showed Anthony Robinson being hit by a bullet in the chest along Sheridan Avenue in the Claremont section just last week. Luckily, though, his daughter was not hurt. A motive for that shooting is unclear.
What about little Maxwell? Does that name ring a bell, Mr. Mayor? The little boy, the 6-year-old that was shot at the West Indian Day Parade? When the round went through that child's leg, it shattered his femur. 5 people were shot that day. When you watch this video, I want you to listen to that child screaming.
Zion! Zion, you have Hold on. Relax. You gotta put pressure. Hold on. Oh my God! Yo, police! Yo, call a cop! Somebody call a cop! Somebody call a cop! The cop is right there, man. The kid is bleeding! Somebody call a cop! Let's go! Don't touch him!
That should haunt you, Mr. Mayor. That should keep you up at night. Did you see the pool of blood that poor kid was sitting in? Did you see that? Look at this. There's blood everywhere. Does anybody care about the people I just mentioned? Where's the outrage? Hey, LeBron, you busy? You busy? You care about black lives? Or you only want to talk about black lives when they involve police? And of course, we got this guy who did the shooting of that 6-year-old boy. Donovan Bailey. He's 15 years old. He's 15 years old. And what is our mayor doing while his city goes to shit? What is the dunce doing? Here he is, painting the street.
Justice! What do we want?
Alright guys, this video is getting too long. I know a lot of people that commented on the first video said that it was a little bit too long, so I'm trying to be mindful of your time. There's just too much stupidity when it comes to Mayor de Blasio to cram into one video, so I'm going to make a part 2. I might have to make a part 3. But let me know in the comments, please, what you think about this guy. Please, let me know. And if you live in New York, be careful. And thank a cop. It's not an easy job. Thanks.